Hardly had the smoke cleared from the rubble of the Twin Towers before the US administration began formulating its response. 9 days later, the then President George W. Bush declared that the fight back wouldn't be limited by international borders.
And we will pursue nations that provide aid or safe haven to terrorism. Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
And then boom, and my window bowed in. I looked out and I saw just this big cloud rising over the far side of the Pentagon, and then debris just raining down.
Colonel David DeRoche was working in the Defense Department in Washington at the time. He says the administration's mindset was completely altered by the atrocity.
And there was this kind of idea that problems that are far off will remain far off. What 9/11 showed was that every country is potentially a problem.
The most immediate of those problems was obvious: Afghanistan. By the end of the year, the Taliban, which had been sheltering al-Qaeda, had been ousted from power. The question was, where next? Throughout its history, the United States has periodically switched between isolationism and interventionism, between withdrawing from the world and trying to influence it. George W. Bush arrived at the White House determined to prioritize his domestic agenda and not be distracted by international affairs. But after 9/11, the so-called neoconservatives in his administration convinced him that there was an opportunity to reshape the world in America's image. In 2003, on the erroneous pretext that Saddam Hussein was hiding weapons of mass destruction, the US invaded Iraq. Another swift military victory followed. But nearly 2 decades and the deaths of hundreds of thousands of civilians later, Iraq is struggling to remain a viable state. Critics say contradictory American foreign policy has also worsened the situation in other parts of the world, most notably Syria. And that instability has contributed to the emergence of Daesh. Supporters of the US so-called war on terror disagree.
You got to ask yourself, why is the U.S. the only guy who's being blamed for this? I mean, the Iranian government has a decades-long program to subvert this, that they're not being held to account by people, forgive me, such as you, the way that the United States is. That's the disadvantage of being a democracy. I think that it's a little simplistic to say if the United States was here and something went wrong, everything's the responsibility of the United States.
But the images of the Taliban back in control of Afghanistan have prompted many Americans to question whether the past 20 years have been worth the sacrifices, and whether the lessons learned from 9/11 were the wrong ones. John Brain, TRT World, Washington.